Now, to dive into the details of the state of Brexit is Michelle Egan. She's a Global Europe Program Fellow at the Wilson Center, and she joins us now live from Toronto. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, Jessica.
So May said in her speech it's not acceptable to simply reject the other side's proposals without a detailed explanation and counter-proposals. Does she have a point?
Yes and no. Her point is political theater. She has a party conference coming up, and she needs to appear strong, not weak. But the EU's been very consistent with its message, and it has not changed that message for a significant amount of time. Theresa May is the one who's drawn red lines in the negotiations.
So you think she has to be the one to compromise?
Yes, she's leaving, and if she does not get a withdrawal agreement and a future trade relationship in process, then 2019, on next year, in 6 months, Britain will be leaving, and the treaties of the EU will no longer be valid.
You know, one question that some of our viewers might have about all of this is, talk us through the idea of a customs border at Northern Ireland and why it's so contentious for her.
Most of the agreement to withdraw has been settled, but one of the thorniest issues is Northern Ireland. That's for 3 reasons. The first reason is Theresa May's government is dependent on the DUP, the Northern Irish Party, that's very nationalist and wants to definitely remain part of the UK and not have a special arrangement. The second issue is the sheer volume of trade and disruption between Northern Ireland and Ireland, which will still remain a member of the EU. And the third issue is that we've forgotten the troubles there and the political conflict, and the Good Friday Agreement is in jeopardy because of the potential of Britain leaving the EU. So there are sort of political reasons, legal reasons, and economic.
What do you think her prospects are domestically? She seems to have a lot on the line here.
She does, but she's in a position of weakness domestically because she's reliant on a small Northern Irish party to govern. She's also had so many people in her cabinet who have resigned, so she's in a position of weakness. The proposal she put forward, called Chequers, several months ago, has not been well received by Brussels. And secondly, some of her own cabinet and her own backbenchers, those in the parliament, don't like that agreement. So her own party is so fragmented and divided, it's very difficult to manage.
I just want to turn now to Mr. Tusk, and of course his bloc's position had been, quote, known to the British side in every detail, as you mentioned earlier. He said EU leaders regarded Chequers as a step in the right direction, but was sort of taken aback by what he called a pretty uncompromising stance by May in Salzburg. Do you get the sense that they're just talking past each other, and how do you get that to stop so that they can cut a deal?
I think Theresa May has 2 audiences. One is the EU and one is her domestic-owned party. And I think that the EU has had the same mandate and has made the same message that Britain can't cherry-pick the economic area and the single market since the very beginning. And I also think that they've been willing to do some compromise and olive branches, even proposing a really ambitious free trade agreement for Britain post-Brexit. And they've tried to depoliticize the Northern Ireland issue and try and come up with some technical solutions to cross-border trade. The problem is that Theresa May is really dealing with a lot of domestic political issues. Some Brexiteers, Brexit means Brexit, we want to be out, we want to be sovereign, we want to be in the WTO. And then others who say, you know, this is going to be an economic disaster for us given our economic ties to the continent.
Lastly, what's the next step here?
The next step will be what will happen to Theresa May at her upcoming annual conference of the Tory party. The second issue will be whether she can scramble and actually get some form of alternative proposal for Northern Ireland and the Irish question and the backstop, as we call it, to prevent a hard border between North and South. And, you know, she has some legal obligations as well in terms of financial obligations to the EU. And then she also has some obligations to the 3 million EU citizens and their rights within the UK. So it's going to, she's in a box, she's in a bind, and it's going to be how much concession will the EU give, and why would they have to give it? The only reason that they would concede on certain issues is because they're looking at the prospect of disruption of their own economies.
Right. Michelle Egan, we'll have to leave it there, but our thanks to you for coming in.